Welcome to the Wolfpack Fitness Podcast with your host, Adrian Wolf. I'm a PhD student in interdisciplinary health sciences with a master's degree in kinesiology and a bachelor's degree in psychology. I've been a fitness coach for over 10 years and I've trained everyone from everyday gym goers to kids to Division I collegiate and professional athletes. My mission is to provide you with actionable knowledge in the areas of fitness, nutrition, stress management, and psychology to help you live your best life every day. Let's get to the show. What's going on, Wolfpack? Welcome back to another episode of the Wolfpack Fitness Podcast with me, your host, Adrian Wolf. If you're liking the content I'm providing, please pause this episode, follow my podcast, and submit a quick rating if you're listening on Spotify, or a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. I want to thank you for continuing to listen and helping me grow my podcast. Now, before I get into this episode, I want to emphasize that the opinions and recommendations in this podcast episode are my own and in no way reflect the views of any military branch of the United States Armed Forces. This podcast episode is for educational purposes only, but it is also separate from my teaching and research roles at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. All right, so with Memorial Day being last week, I wanted to do a military-themed episode to help support those amazing people that continue to make sacrifices and fight for the liberties that all of us have here in the United States. So I want to take this moment to say thank you, and I hope all the Army soldiers and future soldiers gain a lot of value from this episode. I want to start off by giving you some background information on my military experience, particularly with military physical fitness tests, and my experience with exercises commonly seen in these tests. First off, my PhD dissertation research focuses on military human performance. So I really enjoy talking about training methods that can help improve military members' ability to perform their occupations better. My goal for this podcast episode is to provide current and future Army soldiers with detailed knowledge about the new Army Fitness Test, or AFT, what changes were made from the previous Army Combat Fitness Test, or ACFT, why they were made, which exercises are involved, and some training suggestions for making sure that you get the best score possible and not simply settle with just passing the test. For my military and physical fitness testing experience, I was an officer in the U.S. Navy for 5 years. The first 2.5 years were spent earning my surface warfare qualification to become eligible to transfer into the Navy SEAL training program. Over those 2.5 years, I spent a lot of time learning about various methods of physical training, including endurance training, calisthenics or bodyweight exercises, and resistance training or weightlifting exercises. I had to prepare for what's called the SEAL Physical Screening Test, or PST. This test is the same for enlisted sailors and officers, but the standards are much different. The test consists of a 500-yard swim for time using side stroke or breaststroke, max push-ups in 2 minutes, max sit-ups in 2 minutes, max pull-ups until failure, then a 1.5-mile run for time. The minimum standards to qualify for SEAL training for enlisted sailors is 12:30 for the swim, 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, 10 pull-ups, and a 10-minute and 30-second run time. Officer candidates can pretty much forget about the minimum standards for this test and strive to achieve competitive, or elevated as they're called now, test scores to be even considered for an interview. I took these tests a lot, particularly in that final year prior to submitting my application, and the competitive scores I needed to achieve were at least a 9-minute run and swim times, or a combination of under 18 minutes, at least 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 20 pull-ups. The best I ever did in this test was a swim of 8 minutes and 18 seconds, 125 push-ups, 101 sit-ups, 23 pull-ups, and a 9-minute and 14-second run, all of which put me into the competitive category. Unfortunately, the Navy changed its eligibility criteria the year I applied and only invited officers with less than 2 years of service to interview for a slot in training, and I was at 2.5. Unfortunately, that's the way life goes sometimes. It seems unfair, it sucks, but hey, you move on and you do the best you can with what you've got. So I decided to move on from the Navy a couple years later and pursue other challenging activities like triathlons and to see how high I could get my weightlifting numbers. Fast forward 12 years to today, and I trained myself to complete several marathons and Ironman triathlons in respectable times. My best marathon time was 3 hours, 33 minutes, and 20 seconds, and my best Ironman time was 12 hours, 48 minutes, and 55 seconds. Weightlifting has always been a part of my life, so I wanted to see how high I could push my main 3 lifts as well. My best deadlift weight is 375 pounds, my best back squat is 340 pounds, and my best bench press is 225 pounds, all completed at body weights between 155 and 160 pounds. Not too shabby. Someday I'd like to hit a 400-pound deadlift, but if I'm being honest, that's more of a want than a need, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, I wanted to tell you all that so you're comfortable knowing that I have experience in achieving high numbers in military physical fitness tests and strength and endurance tests. And I can guide you with some recommendations to do the same for yourself with the Army fitness test. At some point, I'll do episodes for each of the military branches' fitness tests, but I wanted to start off with the Army because they have had a tremendous impact on the physical fitness and readiness of their soldiers since they launched their Holistic Health and Fitness, or H2F, pilot program in 2018 and officially established it in 2020. Some of the primary aims of this program were to decrease musculoskeletal injuries, reduce numbers of non-deployable personnel, help injured soldiers return to duty faster, and of course, improve physical performance. In fact, an article published in the Army Times in 2024 reported on data collected by the Center for Initial Military Training, which showed that between the years of 2021 and 2023, Army brigades with H2F teams showed a 23% greater ACFT passing rate, which translated to 4,455 more soldiers passing the ACFT. A large part of this is due to military-specific physical training programs implemented by strength and conditioning coaches who are attached to these units. The ACFT, which was officially implemented in 2022, replaced the Army Physical Fitness Test, or APFT, which included only push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. The ACFT grading criteria included age and gender norms and later replaced an exercise called the leg tuck with a plank to assess core muscular endurance. The other exercises that are included in the ACFT include the 3-rep maximum deadlift, standing power throw, hand release push-up, sprint drag carry, and a 2-mile run. As of June 1st, 2025, the Army Fitness Test, or AFT, has officially replaced the ACFT as the official fitness test of record for all soldiers, and some important changes have been made to the test. The AFT is a 5-event physical fitness test, and it has evolved to enhance soldier fitness, improve warfighter readiness, and increase the lethality of the force. The 5 events include the 3-repetition maximum deadlift, hand release push-up, sprint drag carry, plank, and 2-mile run. You probably noticed that the standing power throw is no longer a part of the test. It was removed due to its technical nature and injury risk, and the decision to remove it was supported by data from nearly 1 million test records collected and analyzed by the RAND Corporation's Army Research Division. A combat standard has also been implemented, which is sex neutral and age normed. which means that soldiers serving in a designated list of 21 combat specialties, regardless of sex, must achieve a minimum of 60 points per event according to their age range and an overall minimum score of 350. Soldiers in combat enabling specialties are held to a general standard that is performance normed by sex and age groups, which means that soldiers serving in any specialty other than the designated combat specialties must attain a score of at least 60 points per event according to their sex and age range, and an overall minimum score of 300. So let's get into how the new AFT works and specific exercises for you to focus on if you want to score as high as possible. The first event is a 3-rep max deadlift. After a warm-up, you have up to 2 attempts with your target weight to achieve the heaviest weight you can lift 3 times in a row from the ground to a standing position. If you fail your first attempt, you can move to a lighter weight for your second attempt. You are not allowed to rest or lose your grip with the hex bar at the bottom. You need to perform these reps continuously. The second event is a hand release push-up with arm extension. You have 2 minutes to complete as many reps as possible. You begin in the prone position of the push-up, then you push up into the top position and lower yourself back down to the prone position again. When your body is on the ground, you fully extend your arms out to the side, which is the release. Then you bring them back under your shoulders and proceed into the next push-up rep and continue for the full 2 minutes. The third event is the sprint drag carry. You begin this event in a prone position on the ground. Then you're going to sprint straight ahead for 25 meters. You then touch the ground on or past the line, then turn and sprint back 25 meters. Then you drag a 90-pound sled backwards 25 meters. Once you cross the line, you turn around and drag it back 25 meters. Then you complete a lateral shuffle for 25 meters down and back, facing the same direction. Then you're going to pick up 2 40-pound kettlebells and carry them 25 meters, turn around and carry them back. You finish the event by sprinting forward 25 meters, turning around and sprinting back as fast as possible. And you want to complete all of this as fast as possible. The fourth event is the plank. You begin by laying prone with your elbows and hands on the ground. Then you raise your body up off the ground into a plank position and hold as long as possible. If you raise any extremity off the ground or touch the ground with any other part of your body, your test is done. Your test is also done if you're unable to maintain the proper plank position or correct a deficiency. The fifth and final event is the 2-mile run. You simply run the 2 miles as fast as possible. I put the link for the AFT scoring tables in the show notes so you can check them out and see the points breakdown for each event. I also included a link to YouTube videos for each one of the events so you can actually visualize how to perform them. Now that you know how the test is conducted, let's talk about each one of the events in detail, what they demand, which muscles' physical abilities are targeted, and how to train for each one to achieve your best score. All right, let's go back to the deadlift. This exercise is completed with what is called a hex bar or a trap bar. An approved trap bar for the AFT is the Rogue TB1 Trap Bar 2.0. I included a link in the show notes if you want to see what it looks like. This is a test of maximum strength to see how much weight your muscles are able to lift 3 times in a row. The reason they use a trap bar for this test is because it is less technically demanding than a conventional or straight barbell deadlift, which also puts a lot more strain on your spine and increases your risk of injury if you don't do it correctly. The primary muscles that are used to perform this exercise, starting from the lower body on up, are the quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, which are your butt muscles, lower back, spinal erectors, latissimus dorsi, trapezius, biceps, and forearms. So, to lift as much weight as possible for this exercise, you need to first increase your muscle size. Not necessarily looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but have enough muscle to generate enough force to lift heavy weight. You also need to develop sufficient control over your muscles and joints to handle really heavy loads. Once you can move your extremities efficiently with light to moderate weights, then you can start lifting really heavy weights, where you will make the most of your gains towards maxing out your score for this exercise. Just to give you an idea from the scoring scales about what a maximum score would be for a couple different age groups, for 17 to 21-year-olds, for males or combat specialties, a max score for the 3-rep max deadlift is 340 pounds. And for combat enabling specialties, the max score for women is 220 pounds. For 27 to 31-year-olds, it's actually higher at 350 pounds for combat specialties and 240 pounds for combat enabling specialties. It doesn't change a whole lot as you age, but it drops a little to 210 pounds by the time you hit the 42 to 46-year-old range for combat enabling specialties. So remember to check out the scoring tables for a full breakdown of all the age ranges. So what might the specific workouts look like to get your numbers up on this lift? Aside from doing other accessory exercises like the single leg Romanian deadlift, rear foot elevated split squat, and back extensions, which I've linked videos to in the show notes, you can do something like a 12-week program split up into 4-week cycles that emphasize development of the trap bar deadlift in different ways. For example, your first cycle can emphasize muscle growth and motor control, where you're lifting light to moderate loads in the 8 to 12 rep range, or you're moving these weights with tempo, meaning 3 to 5 seconds of a lowering phase and normal speed coming up off the ground, so you can place the muscles under a greater time under tension. Your second cycle could emphasize basic strength, where you're lifting moderate to heavy weights in a rep range of 4 to 6. And your third 4-week cycle could then emphasize lifting heavy to extremely heavy weights in a rep range of 1 to 3, which would then prepare you for your AFT. You can plan out a 12-week cycle like this to end the week of your test so that you're peaking your muscular strength at exactly the right time to perform your best. Okay, let's talk about the hand release push-up and how to improve that exercise. First off, why is the hand release used rather than just doing the standard push-up to a 90-degree elbow bend? Well, if you've ever done one of these tests with standard push-ups, you know how difficult it can be to enforce a really strict standard for that 90-degree elbow bend and full lockout at the top. There is so much variability from person to person, especially when people are trying to do push-ups as fast as possible. The hand release push-ups remove much of this variability by enforcing a much stricter standard and ensuring the push-up starts from the same position every time, while still being a valid test of upper body muscular endurance. So while the number of push-ups you will be doing in 2 minutes is much lower than the standard way that other branches like the Navy still use, for example, according to their 2025 PRT guidelines, it is a more valid measure of upper body muscular endurance. And you might find that it is even more challenging than doing the standard push-up because it also removes the stretch shortening cycle or stretch reflex from the muscles and tendons as you transition from lowering to lifting in the standard push-up. So a max score for combat specialties for, say, the 22 to 26-year-old range is 61 and 50 for combat enabling specialties. So how do you train to achieve these max scores? The primary muscle groups used with this exercise include the entire lower body and core musculature, used isometrically, meaning the muscles are contracting to stabilize those areas of the body while your upper extremities move you up and down. The muscles of the upper body that are primarily used are the pectoralis major, deltoids, and triceps. To improve your score on this exercise, you can do exercises like the bench press, pillar plank, and 8-count push-up, which I've linked in the show notes. The bench press can be used to develop more strength compared to the other exercises. This is important because you need an adequate amount of strength to generate enough force to push yourself up off the ground, even though it's a muscular endurance test. The pillar plank and 8-count push-up will layer on top of that muscular strength to ensure you can do the exercise repeatedly for many repetitions and not fatigue as quickly. You can follow somewhat of a reverse of that 12-week program I mentioned for the deadlift by focusing on basic strength in the first cycle, then max strength in the second cycle, followed by a muscular endurance cycle for the final 4 weeks, where you're performing the bench press for 12 to 20 reps and the pillar plank and 8-count push-up for greater than 20 reps for multiple sets, and maybe even doing some max effort trial tests a week or two before your actual test to get your muscles really prepared for the higher repetition test. Next, let's talk about the sprint drag carry. This test assesses your ability to perform high-intensity muscular work over a short duration, meaning your total body muscular endurance, muscular strength, anaerobic power, and anaerobic endurance. It also secondarily assesses your balance, coordination, agility, flexibility, and reaction time. Since moving a moderate amount of weight is a large component of this test, your ability to lift and carry heavier weights will improve your ability to move that moderate weight faster because that weight is a lower relative percentage of the max weight you can lift or carry compared to someone who can't lift and carry as heavy of a weight. So being able to lift more weight on the trap bar deadlift should theoretically translate into better performance in the kettlebell carry and sled drag. However, fatigue becomes more of a factor in this sprint drag carry test. So if all you can do is lift heavy weight, but you have no anaerobic capacity, then you will likely have a slower time compared to someone who also develops their anaerobic capacity by doing sprints, shuttle runs, and also practicing kettlebell carry and sled drag intervals. An example of an interval would be performing a kettlebell carry or sled drag for 2 by 25 meters once every 1 to 1.5 minutes for a certain number of repetitions, say 5 to 8. You perform the carry or drag as fast as possible, then you have the remainder of that 1 to 1.5 minutes to rest. Then you perform the carry or drag again. Also, shuttle runs, say 25 meters out and back for 6 times for a total of 300 meters as fast as possible with a set amount of rest time, say 1.5 to 3 minutes, in between 300-meter intervals will substantially improve your score in this event as well. And don't forget about the lateral shuffle. It's a side-to-side movement pattern that is often neglected and can really slow your time in this event. So you can do 100 to 300 meter shuttles, just like for sprints, to improve your ability to do this faster as well. And don't cheat by turning your lead toe out in the direction you are traveling. This changes the muscles you are using to more of your hip flexors in the front of your hip rather than your hip abductors on the side of your hip, making it easier, but this will only hurt you in the long run. Many people's hip abductors are weak compared to the flexors, so you will only be reinforcing a problem that needs to be fixed, and you will likely get called out for it during the test as well. So do it right. A max score for combat specialties in the 32 to 36-year-old range is 1 minute and 33 seconds, and for combat enabling specialties, it's 1 minute and 59 seconds. Next is the plank. Honestly, there's not much to this one, but interestingly enough, many people perform the plank in a way that is inefficient and relies on the hip flexors more than the core muscles, leading to a weaker and underdeveloped core than is desirable. I linked a video demonstration on how to do this exercise properly if you want to get the most benefits from it. There are actually 4 layers to your abdominal muscles, and all of them should be trained if you want to max out this event. Those layers of muscles, going from the most superficial to the deepest, are the rectus abdominis, which is your six pack, external obliques, internal obliques, and transversus abdominis, which is the deepest layer that surrounds your trunk like a cylinder. Core training is not just about doing endless amounts of sit ups and trying to see your six pack, my friends. Let's start to reframe that notion of core training. This is a big reason why I believe the Army moved away from sit ups as a test of measuring core muscular endurance. If you think about it, the sit up is really mostly a test of hip flexor and rectus abdominis muscular endurance, which is hardly a valid measure of total core muscular endurance. The first portion of the sit up involves the rectus abdominis by curling your upper back off the ground. Then your hip flexors take over by, of course, flexing your hip and bringing the rest of your trunk off the ground. Are your deeper layers of core musculature involved in keeping your trunk rigid while you bring your elbows to your knees? Of course. But the main limiter in this exercise tends to be fatigue in your hip flexors, not your deeper core muscles. But enough of my rant about the sit-up. Aside from practicing the plank frequently, you can also do exercises like the bent or straight leg raise and side plank to improve your time and max out this event. A max score for combat and combat enabling specialties in the 17 to 21-year-old range is 3 minutes and 40 seconds. That's a long time to be holding a plank. And finally, there's the 2-mile run, which is a test of aerobic endurance. It's the final event because it is the most fatiguing for the body as a whole. To improve your run time, you will need to strike a balance between muscle strength, power, and endurance. Also, if you have too much muscle, that can hinder your ability to run faster. So focus your resistance training or weightlifting on building maximum strength and power, which is your muscle's ability to contract quickly and explosively rather than training just to build muscle size. This will ensure that you have an adequate amount of muscle that you can move quickly rather than just for show or aesthetics. That will take care of the muscle size and function part of the equation. The other part of the equation is aerobic endurance. Sprinkle some longer, slower runs of 3 to 5 miles a day or two into each week to build your endurance, while putting another 1 to 2 days of shorter, high-intensity anaerobic intervals, like 2 to 400 meter runs, with designated recovery times in between each interval into your week. And don't forget about those middle distances, which are probably the most important, which includes that 2-mile distance. Include a day or two of distances, including half a mile to 1 mile repeats with programmed rest in between. These intervals should be done at an intensity of 7 to 8 out of 10, which corresponds to your anaerobic or lactate threshold intensity, which is that intensity you'll be running your 2-mile test at. When you run your 2-mile test, you want to run at this intensity of a 7 to 8 out of 10 for the majority of the test, while leaving the last quarter mile or so to push as hard as possible until you have nothing left. Don't start out at an all-out sprint because you won't be able to sustain it for the full 2 miles. Runners call that last push to the finish the final kick, which is where you want to figuratively light and burn your last match and give it everything you have left. A max score for combat specialties in the 22 to 26-year-old range is 13 minutes and 25 seconds, which translates to a 6 minute and 43 second mile. And for combat enabling specialties, it's 15 minutes and 30 seconds, which translates to a 7 minute and 45 second mile. Considering all the events as a whole, I will say it can be quite a challenge to max out each event and max out the test as a whole. However, it can definitely be done. Remember to strike a balance between strength, power, anaerobic capacity, and aerobic capacity. If you notice that you really excel in one of these areas, give a little bit to improve your performance in other areas. There's a reason why the Army tests all these different physical abilities, and that's to develop the most physically prepared, well-rounded, combat effective soldier possible. For your action item, get a friend or a group of people together or on your own and test one or all of these events and see which ones need some work and where any deficiencies might exist. Spend some time working on your deficiencies so that you have a more well-rounded physical fitness profile and go crush your next AFT. All right, that's all for today, Wolfpack. If you're liking the content, please follow and rate the show on Spotify or leave me a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and introduce the show to your friends and family. And if you know somebody that's joining the Army or wants to join or is currently in the Army, please share this episode with them so they can improve their Army fitness test. I would also love for you to leave a comment about any additional topics you would like to learn about in the areas of fitness, nutrition, stress management, or psychology. You can also find me on social media on Instagram at coach_awolf and YouTube at Wolfpack Fitness. Thanks for listening. Go get your action item done and tune in for the next episode. Take care. Thank you for listening. If you like the content, be sure to follow my podcast, leave a review, and check out the show notes for additional details and links discussed in this episode. My mission is to provide you with actionable knowledge in the areas of fitness, nutrition, stress management, and psychology. It is often said that knowledge is power, but I like to say that knowledge applied is even more powerful. Take what you learned today and find a way to apply it to your lifestyle so you can continue living your best life. Thanks, and be sure to activate the new episode notifications to be the first to learn about new and exciting content. See you next time.